formula for professional wrestling has pretty much been standard since the invention of pay-per-view. The idea is a feud starts, it continues, and it's blown off or escalates at the pay-per-view. The idea behind this was for wrestling fans to want to purchase pay-per-views solely based on the fact of the feuds that were happening on screen. The idea that you weren't able to see big matches on television was a draw for people to go and buy the pay-per-views, which is why they call it pay-per-view. Vince McMahon revolutionized this idea when he started WrestleMania 1 on closed-circuit television, and for a very long time, this was the way that feuds were blown off. However, there are several feuds that were pretty prominent on wrestling television that never got a pay-per-view blow-off. Here's a list of 5 feuds that WWE never had blown off on pay-per-view. We start this list with something a little bit more recent. In 2014, Damian Mizdao started his gimmick of dressing up as different wrestlers and performing as them. And to be honest, sometimes it wasn't even wrestlers. There was an episode of Raw where he dressed up as Magneto and was vanquished by Hugh Jackman. Yes, that happened. Despite the fact that this gimmick wasn't the best use of Damian Sandao's immense talent, Sandow ended up getting it over. Mostly because he started impersonating The Miz. The Miz at this time wanted a stunt double. So the idea was that Damian Sandow would be Miz's stunt double and take the bumps that Miz didn't want to take. Sandow reinvented himself, and instead of calling himself Damian Sandow, became known as Damian Mizdao. The idea then evolved from Mizdao just taking bumps for The Miz, and it turned into Mizdao impersonating every single move that The Miz made. Mizdao actually wound up getting the gimmick over so strong that he and Miz actually won the tag titles in a fatal 4-way, which also consisted of Cody Rhodes under the Stardust gimmick and his brother Goldust, the Usos, and Los Matadores. Miz and Mizdao continued being dominant in tag team matches, but it kind of looked like The Miz was getting a little bit upset with the fact that Mizdao seemed to be a little bit more over than The Miz. This led to The Miz kind of mistreating Mizdao, and the fans really getting behind Mizdao. The biggest moment that happened on pay-per-view when it came to this feud was in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal that year, where Miz, Mizdao, and The Big Show were the final 3 competitors, and Mizdao actually eliminated The Miz after The Miz tried to make Mizdao eliminate himself from the Battle Royal to help The Miz win. The pop was humongous, one of the biggest of the night, and even though The Big Show actually won the Battle Royal, it really looked like The Mizdao was going to take the next step into stardom. What followed was just absolutely abhorrent booking by WWE. The Miz and Mizdao wound up trading victories back and forth over the next few weeks before The Miz got one final big victory over Mizdao in April on Monday Night Raw, and the feud went away. Also going away was Damian Sandow's push. Despite how over Damian Sandow got, he went back and reverted to Damian Sandow and started making fun of other people. The gimmick was dead on arrival and no one seemed to care. The WWE could have positioned Sandow into being a pretty big part of their future plans, but never capitalized on his popularity. And thus this feud never got the blow-off that it truly, honestly deserved. Number 4 is actually even more recent than the last. In 2017, we got the Battle of the Giants as Big Show and Braun Strowman started their feud on Monday Night Raw. Braun Strowman was fresh off of beating Roman Reigns at Payback the night before, and WWE made it a very big deal that Braun and Big Show's first match would be taking place that night. They even did a tail of the tape comparison to both of these big men and gave them the main event on the show. What followed next was some of the most incredible things that we'd seen from 2 big men in the industry. The Big Show kind of gets a little bit of a bad reputation of almost resting on his laurels and maybe just turning heel and face too much, but when the Big Show really needs to turn it on and be that guy to take charge in the ring and help out a younger superstar, the Big Show has always been very good, and it can be credited to the Big Show that Braun Strowman got over as strong as he did. Not only the Big Show and Braun battle it out and exchange power moves, but these guys did way more than just be 2 monsters. They actually chain wrestled. Braun Strowman did a kip-up in the middle of their match. Strowman was throwing drop kicks at the Big Show. Big Show was using his size and his athleticism to show off how much he can still do when he's in the ring with someone comparable to his size. The biggest moment of the feud ended up being Big Show and Braun suplexing each other off the top rope and breaking the ring. Even though it was something we'd seen before, it was still an incredible sight. It really built up Braun and Big Show as 2 monsters who would just do anything to tear into each other. The only issue is that in that match, Braun actually hurt his elbow and was out for 2 months. So even if there was a planned match for these two, unfortunately, it didn't happen. When Braun came back a couple of months later, the WWE didn't completely retcon the feud. They actually had Braun and Big Show go one-on-one in a cage match. This is a very, very weird cage match for the reason that the Big Show actually shaved completely. Complete babyface, no beard whatsoever. It was a very strange looking Big Show. And it also got a wrestling figure, which to me is shocking because it was a one-night event. But it was a big deal, and Braun Strowman picked Big Show up over his shoulder and put him through the cage, cementing Braun Strowman's push in the WWE as a top-tier guy for the foreseeable future until his release. However, the Big Show and Braun never really got the really big pay-per-view blow-off that feud deserved. Both of these guys worked insanely hard to bring some new hard-hitting action to WWE, and they never got the chance to show it off on pay-per-view. Next on the list was something that seemed like an absolute no-brainer. In 1991, the Demolition were one of the top tag teams in WWF. At the time, they were the World Tag Team Champions and on top of the world, and then the Legion of Doom arrived. Due to some unfortunate circumstances with the health of Demolition's axe, the WWF substituted Crush in, and Demolition became a three-man team for a while just in case Axe was unable to perform. What followed was Demolition and the Legion of Doom doing battle. After Demolition lost the World Tag Team titles to the Hart Foundation, the next big feud that they had was the Legion of Doom. And they actually did square off at one point on pay-per-view, but it was in a Survivor Series traditional 4-on-4 match where the Warriors, which was the Ultimate Warrior, the modern-day Warrior Kerry Von Erich, or at that time the Texas Tornado, and the Road Warriors, or at that time the Legion of Doom, took on Axe, Smash, and Crush of Demolition and Mr. Perfect. Now this match was cool, but I think fans really wanted to see the Demolition versus the Legion of Doom 2-on-2 on pay-per-view. But we never got it. The Ultimate Warrior was the world champion at the time, and on the house show loops, it actually just became the battle of the guys in paint as the Warrior teamed up with the Legion of Doom to take on all three members of the Demolition. While these matches have actually surfaced, as a matter of fact, I reviewed one of those on this channel, which was on the Coliseum home videotape, these guys never got a traditional 2-on-2 tag team match on pay-per-view. Something that seems so obvious just unfortunately never happened. And it's something that wrestling fans will always remember, never being able to see. The next one is actually really strange considering how long both of these guys were on the WWE roster at the same time. Right in the middle of the Monday Night Wars, WWE got an amazing coup by getting Chris Jericho to come over from WCW and to be a part of the WWF roster. Jericho was positioned as a top guy from his inception, interrupting The Rock during a promo, and The Rock was the hottest act in wrestling at the time. However, what kind of followed for Chris Jericho during his career was him kind of just losing his place and not being used to the best of his abilities until he won the Intercontinental Championship and had a big feud with China. From there on out, Jericho was kind of positioned more towards the upper tier of the card, even defeating Triple H on Monday Night Raw for the world title in something that was quickly reversed, but a moment that wrestling fans never forgot. Jericho then wrestled at the top on multiple occasions, main eventing pay-per-view after pay-per-view after pay-per-view, and eventually becoming the first ever undisputed heavyweight champion in WWE history. So you would think that if Chris Jericho is one of the top guys in the WWE, he's probably had a pay-per-view match with almost every top guy in the WWE. And he pretty much has. All except The Undertaker. And even when they had a decent feud going on, Jericho and Undertaker never got the chance to have a one-on-one pay-per-view match. It's funny because Jericho was always in the middle of something else, or Undertaker was always in the middle of something else. When Chris Jericho pinned The Undertaker for the World Heavyweight Championship in the Elimination Chamber, it was due to outside interference from Shawn Michaels. And Jericho wound up winning a match with The Undertaker, but that match happened on SmackDown, not on pay-per-view. But Chris Jericho and Undertaker was definitely a very interesting feud, and it seemed like in the few times that they locked it up, they had good chemistry. It was a missed opportunity in the WWE, as both of those guys can go and they can cut promos. It could have been an excellent feud. It's surprising that we never got Chris Jericho versus The Undertaker one-on-one on pay-per-view in WWE. And finally, this is probably the most obvious. In 1991, when Ric Flair defected from the NWA and WCW and came over to the World Wrestling Federation at the time, it was a major coup for WWE. Ric Flair was the man in WCW at the time, the guy that everyone wanted to see. And in his absence, people were still chanting "We want Flair" at almost every WCW taping. Ric Flair even brought the big gold belt, the WCW Heavyweight Championship, onto WWE television and showed it off for the world to see. Now, you would think that the obvious feud would be the king of the WCW versus the king of WWF, Ric Flair versus Hulk Hogan. And it seemed like that's where WWF was going. Ric Flair came in and his immediate first target was Hulk Hogan, even costing Hulk Hogan the World Heavyweight Championship by slipping a steel chair into the ring for the Undertaker to tombstone Hogan on it, which caused Hogan to lose his heavyweight championship to the Undertaker. The following Tuesday in Texas, Hulk Hogan used ashes from the Undertaker's urn, threw it into the Undertaker's eyes, and won his championship back. But WWE President Jack Tunney stripped Hogan of the championship and put the championship on the line in the 1992 Royal Rumble. And Ric Flair ends up winning the whole thing. Ric Flair came in at number 3 in that match and was one of the most incredible feats of endurance that anyone has ever seen in wrestling. What everyone then guessed was that at WrestleMania, Ric Flair would defend his heavyweight championship against Hulk Hogan. However, the WWE started running some of those matches on house shows. And from what other people have said, they didn't get the most favorable of receptions. Now, this could be that maybe some of the towns they ran them in just didn't care that much. Maybe WWF fans weren't as familiar with Ric Flair's work in WCW as everybody thought they were. Or maybe the chemistry just didn't wind up working out, and it took Hogan and Flair a little bit longer to kind of get that chemistry going, and we wound up seeing this pay-per-view match in WCW. But we never saw it in WWE. Instead, Flair had his major feud with Randy Savage, flip-flopping the heavyweight championship back and forth a few times before Ric Flair ultimately lost that championship to Bret the Hitman Hart, and had his loser leaves town match on Monday Night Raw, losing to Mr. Perfect. Hulk Hogan beat Sting in the main event of WrestleMania, and then disappeared from WWE television for a decent amount of time, and we wouldn't see Hogan and Flair lock up again until they both ended up back in WCW. So there you have it. 5 feuds that took place in WWE but never got a pay-per-view blow-off. Are there some that I missed? Let me know in the comments. Which one of these would you have most wanted to see on pay-per-view? Let me know. And as always, please like, subscribe, and share all the videos that you possibly can. It's an amazing help for the channel, and I would really appreciate all of your guys' help. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time.